So what I've discovered is there were 25 Mormons at least that walked between Salt Lake City and down here with these people. Some walked 3 days with them. None of them really have a complaint except for some of the murderers that were spying on them. When the train came through here, it went through Hamblin's and someone asked, they passed by quietly, everyone said. Someone asked if they had any butter. The answer was no. They set up camp, and the next day 2 parties go out. One to look for lost cows, and one to get some pine tar for some like axle grease. Well, these guys are out in this territory. 3 of them in a bunch. Does it make sense if you just walked 250 miles, insulting people, snapping the heads off of chickens, poisoning the waters, raping the women and the children, doing all that other stuff, that you would just walk quietly through here, send men out independently? In fact, people, Mormons, came down here in groups of 2s and 3s and visited with them prior to the attack. Higbee is said to have sent 2 guys down here to urge them on. But it's well known they came here to recruit their stock and rest for a few days. Who was 5 days behind? The Duke's train. So when John D. Lee came in here, he had to convince them that the Duke's train wasn't showing up, because they know the Duke train is behind them. So John D. Lee had to say something in relation to the Duke's train that would lead them to surrender their arms, and we know the rest of the story. So this line here is the old road. I've been researching this. This is where we started with the piece of original roadway. This is 2,325 yards, the reference given by Carlton, which is why references showing this area don't work, and neither do other references showing it down in here, as shown by Bagley. Josiah Gibbs, Juanita Brooks uses Josiah Gibbs' map. It doesn't work. You just have to go line of sight from here to here. And this conforms to the rim of the basin. So then you come across here. This apparently is a gravel pit. Anyhow, the road, this might be part of the road. So here's the original road. See how that's depressed in there? So all of this has been burned over more than once. So I've moved the map. And then we get down in here. Okay, and you can see this. It starts to fade out because we're in an area that's been partially plowed over. This is where I left off. But again, you can still see this little shadow comes through the front yard, and then we start to lose track of it. This is where we left off. So I know that the original California road went through here, but our scene is a half a mile over here. So that any detour off the road is going to bring you over this way between these hills over here, going through this ravine that was about 5 feet deep at the time. It's not entirely clear to me how deep it was up in here, so they may have crossed over up in here, which means you just have to walk back, say 150 yards. This was all eroded out in 1862. So it's still a question to me in almost every one of these videos why you would want to come over here when you're already over here. But in any case, that is part of the original road. It did come down through here. There's an older road that's supposed to be part of the old Spanish Trail that's, well, it's off on this side. It was out in here a little bit more. And then hooks back in, basically just off screen here where these 2 creeks come together. But that would be the old Spanish Trail. One of the reasons I make hay out of being on the other side of the ravine, just to walk this detour, and of course you want to be near the water, is a half a mile. Or probably close to a half-hour walk. You got to move 900 cows and something like 40 wagons into wherever it is you're going to stay. So I'm a little perplexed on why everything gets placed over here. Carlton gives the measurement to Hamblin's as 4.6 miles, Which brings us precisely to here where my little hand is. I put a video up showing this tree here. It's a big, I think it's a sycamore. Whatever it is, it's large. And you can see this rectangular pad here, and there's some other building sites in here. It's all gone now. So, you know, it's line of sight from Carlton. Prince is the cartographer. And that gives you 4.6 miles and lands you right at that tree. So they did pretty good measurements. And that's why I'm sticking with these measurements and not the ones I've mentioned prior. So to ride your horse up here is about 7 miles. It's not just 4.6 miles in a straight line. I'm sure they were very quiet because that's what they did the whole time they were walking. That's why people like Holly, who walked with him for 3 days. He didn't even know Fancher's name. He didn't know who the Dutchman was. How do you walk with him for 3 days if you're snapping the heads off of chickens and you don't know the head of the train? You don't know who this Dutchman is that's raising all this hell? Anyhow, these two groups of 3, one went out about another 10 miles out past Pinto, and the other one went up into these hills looking for pine tar. Needless to say, they were never seen again. So in conclusion, we have a wagon train that's supposedly extremely hostile and threatening, who comes in here and does nothing by everyone's own testimony, camps down here, sends out 2 small groups of men on journeys of roughly 20 miles to go looking for pine tar. Does it make sense? Does it make sense that all these Mormons could walk with these people for weeks? For weeks. You know, what seems to have happened is that whenever there wasn't a Mormon walking with them, then they were snapping the head off of some poor chicken. Anyhow, this is the lay of the land, and these people didn't do anything. If they had done anything, they certainly wouldn't have sent these men out the way we just discussed. So we have more evidence of more Mormon lies. So pretty soon I'm going to have a map laid out all the way from Salt Lake down to here, and I'm going to ID each city all the way down and the Mormons that walked with them. 25 Mormons in 250 miles over a period of, what, a few weeks? That's something to consider, and it's not something that's really brought up in the books or in the court testimony. That's a lot of people over a long distance. Well, that's a lot of Mormons. And that's today's lesson on the Mountain Meadows.